Good morning.
Morning, Chair.
Can we start now? Colleagues, as we start, let me take this moment to really say we are meeting today, the 31st March 2026, which marks the end of our first term. It has been very, very hectic that term, colleagues, compatriots, from the beginning when we started with our oversight visit to the province of KwaZulu-Natal, and all the up and downs we have done since the start of the year. It has been very, very hectic. I think this is one of the most hectic quarter we had since we arrived in Parliament. And I really want to extend my appreciation to all of you for having stayed tuned, and those who could not be able to make it, continue to give input on the side on how we must move things forward. Those who were caught up somewhere apologizing on time and telling us I may not be able to be available, but these are my views. That was very, very much appreciated, colleagues. Once again, we have trumped over this term without being partisan, approaching the things in the best interest of the people of South Africa, approaching all issues in the best interest of our people without being politically divided, without being partisan, without being taking any other side except the side of our people. And as the chair, I really want to extend my appreciation to all of you for that. I take this moment today as I welcome you on this platform on this hour of 30 minutes after the hour 9, scheduled to until the 30 minutes after the hour 9, to really appreciate all of you and welcome you to this session. Our session today is supposed to be brief. I know majority of you who are still in Cape Town might be traveling to the various destinies for either for pilgrimages or for holidays and so forth. I'm going to try to run this meeting as speedily as it can be possible. The agenda is projected there. One first item is a briefing on the petition from Ms. NLTA on behalf of the Western Cape Network of Disability, calling for amendment and enforcement of National Land Transport Act 2009, Act number 5, to guarantee equitable, reliable, and accessible public transport service for persons with disability. You know, Ms. NLTA is a member of Parliament, and I think some say she served with us briefly in this committee. Consideration number 2, consideration and adoption of report of the petition from the Amadiwa community. I think we have done that. Number 3, consideration and adoption of report on the 2025-26 third quarter expenditure of the Department of Transport. We'll run also quickly on that. Consideration and adoption of draft 2026 second term committee program. We'll also run quickly on that. I hope colleagues have received these documents before and they've obviously read them. Without much ado, is there a mover to adopt this agenda? Mover 1. Honorable Malmajo.
Thank you very much, Chair. As I greet everybody on the platform and fellow South Africans, it was not deliberately to undermine. It's just I'm struggling to raise my hands as a norm of the meeting. I stand to move for the adoption of this agenda, Chairperson. Thank you so much.
We can work on it. We can work on this agenda. Anyone who second that will work on this agenda quickly.
I second, Chair. That's Ghana.
Oh, Honorable Ghana, how are you? Thanks very much. How are you, Honorable Ghana?
I say that you have been asked for apologies, so I was going to apologize for myself for being here.
You're going to apologize for?
Apologize for myself.
Okay. Yeah, no. Hey, you're right. Project again. Thanks for that soft guidance and soft reprimand. Colleagues, can I take apologies? I know Valerie has sent audio. If you can assist Priscilla, Valerie, and Alma, if there are apologies from your side. And one of the members, if there are apologies that you have recorded from your side also.
Chair, on behalf of Valerie, the apologies are from Ms. Kobe, the Minister, and the Deputy Minister.
Oh, thanks very much. Honorable members, anyone with the apology? If none, we can proceed. Let's proceed to the next item. What is the next item? Project. I'm no longer seeing the screen, Alma. Whoever is projecting.
Okay, Chair, while they project, I just wanted to indicate that I will leave the platform at 10:30. I have another pressing matter.
Okay, Honorable Gama. Okay,
thank you.
Thanks, my dear brother. Thanks very much. Yeah, you can be briefed. Over to you, Advocate.
Good morning, honourable colleagues of the Portfolio Committee on Transport.
Chair.
Honourable Boss.
Yes, Chair. My apologies, Chair. No, not to disturb. Because Honourable Nolichung is not here, Chair. I don't know that you will give us an opportunity to speak on the petition, or we just give it straight to the representatives to speak on it.
Let's to the representative, and if there's anything you would want to add, we'll allow you.
Okay, copy, Chair. No problem.
So, Honourable Alma, if you can make sure that everything's in order.
Yes, Chair. The presenters will be taking you through the petition there, Chair, and then we can, as you indicated, we'll just get a introduction of the petition by Mr. Blosse on behalf of Ms. Nolachungu.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you very much, Chair. May I proceed?
Yes, yes, Anthony.
Thanks. That's great. Thank you very
and
much.
welcome to the platform together with the team you are with.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today about something which is really important to people with disabilities in South Africa. So we're going to be sharing the presenting duties. All three presenters are people with disabilities. We have various disabilities, and so we're speaking from our lived experience as well as experience and knowledge gained through the sector. We represent an organization called the Western Cape Network on Disability. I'm the current chair. Notukela and Lily are members of the exec. And the Western Cape Network on Disability is made up of around about 80 organizations of and for people with disabilities. So we are a large representational group, and we look out for the interests of people across the different disability sectors. So it's not just wheelchair users, people who are blind, it is people with any disability, any impairment. And thank you very much for the opportunity to address you today. We can go on to the next slide. All right, so just some introduction and background as to where we are. And the reason, as it says on the slide, is we really want to call on Parliament to relook at the National Land Transport Act. There are, in our opinion, some serious shortcomings which lead to the marginalization and continued marginalization of people with disabilities. So what we're trying to achieve is an equitable transport system that is reliable and accessible to people with disabilities, and perhaps not just for people with disabilities. I think the key is that we want a transport system which is accessible to everyone, irrespective of your level of mobility or your lack of mobility. So that's why we're here today. The next slide. Just background as to how we got to the current situation. And the reality is that people with disabilities continue to be excluded from our public transport system, not just in Cape Town and the Western Cape, but across South Africa. And the impact that this has on our community is significant. We cannot underestimate it. In Cape Town, there is a service called Dial a Ride, which is a dedicated public transport system for people with disabilities, but it is very inadequate. There is a similar system that runs in eThekwini and is also under-resourced and has challenges which it faces. The reality is that it's a door-to-door service, so it is very demanding and heavy on resources, and it remains inaccessible for many of our people with disabilities. It also has criteria which are quite tight and exclude a number of people depending on what their impairment may be. We can go to the next slide, which presents the challenges, the real impact of not having transport. For it says they're a quarter of the population. We know that around 15% of the population have some sort of disability. And the reality is that without transport, people with disabilities are confined to their homes. We become prisoners in our own environments. That is the sad reality. That's what our members and constituents have likened it to. So without transport, it doesn't matter what programs are in place to create jobs, to educate our people, to access healthcare. If we cannot get there, all of that becomes irrelevant. And it means and leads to the continued discrimination and marginalization of people with disabilities. So in all honesty, without transport, it is very difficult for people with disabilities to be integrated into our communities and to play a leading role in our lives, to be integrated and just to have a quality of life. And then, of course, we mustn't forget that the lack of an accessible public transport system is in violation of the principles of equity, dignity is infringed upon, and it also goes against what our constitution speaks to, and importantly, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, of which South Africa is a signatory. So it's not just an inconvenience, there also are legislative matters as well that are impacted on. Our next slide. All right, so some of the accessibility issues. There's definitely a limitation to the dedicated services like Dial a Ride that we have in Cape Town and eThekwini. They are very under-resourced and just cannot cope with the demand. In Cape Town, the city of Cape Town have estimated that there could be as many as 31,000 potential users for Dial a Ride. So 31,000 people who would like to use the service every day. Currently, they can't even accommodate 300 people per day. So it is a real challenge. Remembering that people with disabilities, a wheelchair user, people with vision impairment, they cannot just hop on the next bus or the next taxi if it's not accessible. Without specialized adapted public transport, we are literally stuck at home. So we are continue to be stuck at home. There's a systemic exclusion which continues to happen as we face these barriers and being excluded from public transport. As I said earlier, it limits our access to all aspects of life, including employment, education, healthcare, social participation, and many, many more. So it's vital that we have an accessible public transport system in place. One of the shortcomings that we've identified in the National Land Transport Act is that accessibility provisions are discretionary. There is no it's not mandatory. So it's up to someone's discretion as to what happens with regards to access. And two examples which I can give, which have occurred in the last 6 months or so. I know that Prasa have bought 98 vehicles, buses, and only 10 of them have accessibility features. Why were all 98 not purchased with accessibility features? In Cape Town, Golden Arrow recently bought 120 buses, and not one of them have accessibility features. So in our opinion, that's unacceptable, and it should be mandatory that new rolling stock is accessible and has the features that will ensure that all people are able to use them. We can go to the next slide, please. So there's also the lack of enforcement mechanisms. So we would really like to see enforcement mechanisms and sanctions in place so that if and when there's a failure to provide accessible public transport services, someone is accountable. There's someone that we can go and speak to and that we can hold responsible. It's also very unfortunate and disturbing to us that there are no requirements for consultation to take place with the sector. In the disability sector, we are very proud of our slogan, which says nothing about us without us. And the sad reality is that as things stand, we can have a public transport system enforced upon us without consultation, either with community groups of people with disabilities or representatives from the organizations that operate in that space. And that's really key. We need that to change. There's also an absence of national standards. So unfortunately, the lack of national minimum standards and funding obligations is also a part of the problem, which ties our hands and ensures that the provinces and municipalities do not deliver as they should. And we're not just focusing on dial-a-ride, we're looking at access of all public transport across the country. But when it comes to something like dial-a-ride, I've already touched on the capacity issues. And the reality is that the service only serves a fraction of the people that are eligible. And by doing so, it actually discriminates against other people with disabilities who aren't able to get access to that service. So while it serves a few people, it actually ends up leading to discrimination and hardship for those that aren't able to access. At this stage, I'm going to leave the presentation in the hands of my colleague, Dr. Keller. Dr. Keller, over to you.
Thanks, Anton. Thanks. Let the colleague come in. Thanks for a solid presentation.
Thank you so much, Chairperson. I've had to quickly stop sharing so that I can unmute myself. I'm going to start sharing again. As my colleague and Chairperson said, my name is Notugela Makotliso. I'm an executive board member of the Western Cape Network on Disabilities. Firstly, I just want to thank this committee. I want to thank you, Chair. I want to thank the members of this committee for this opportunity. We do not take it lightly. I think it would also be remiss of us to not thank the Honorable Chief Whip of EFF, Honorable Nolu Chungu, and her party for recognizing this need and for sponsoring this bill amendment. We're grateful. We don't just pay lip service to helping the vulnerable in our communities, but actually doing something about it. So in her absence, I just want to say thank you. The proposed amendments in the National Transport Land Act became a reality in my life when I acquired a disability at the age of 32. So if you have been exposed to life without a disability, and then you are faced with the challenges and the limitations that you have when you exist with a disability, it's traumatizing. And so when we are calling for these amendments that we're going to go through, that we need the Act to amend, it's because it's a real need that will give dignity to people's lives. And we can advocate for this from our lived reality, knowing what an important need that it is. So we're quickly going to go through the 12 amendments that we propose. I'm only going to deal with 8, and then my colleague Lily will deal with 3 of them. Let's start with accessibility requirements. It's important for all public transport and all planning authorities and service providers to feature strong accessibility requirements. This law needs to be able to not only ambiguously, but explicitly change the language to make it enforceable. So we've suggested a change from Section 10A of the bill, from saying take steps to promote, to something that has more surety, something that we can adhere to and we can enforce, to something like shall ensure the provision of integration of accessible transport, because our language matters. So this act, the amendments that we are proposing, is that it says what it means so that people can do what it means. Speaking of language, We are also proposing that we change the definition of disabilities to be in alignment with the UNCRPD. My colleague Anthony mentioned that South Africa is a signatory of that instrument. So as part of domesticating that instrument, we need to change the definition of disability, not only in this act, by the way, but throughout our constitution in South Africa, to feature the plethora of all different disabilities. There are so many apparent and unapparent disabilities. Staying with definitions, we also need to clearly define what is universal design and what is reasonable accommodation. These are not just disability rights, they're human rights. And you don't realize it until you acquire a disability, which is something that is possible for anyone at any stage of your life. So we also propose the purpose clause. As part of the amendments, we propose explicitly state that one of our primary purposes is to achieve universal access and full inclusion in the national land transport system for persons with disabilities. The other thing that we deem to be very important is to have advisory bodies enacted in this bill that will advise on policies, on norms, on standards, regulations, and all related accessibility. My colleague mentioned earlier on nothing about us without us. In these days, it's becoming a cliche. It is not a cliche. It is necessary to include persons with disabilities so that we can use our lived experience to inform better norms in our community. Further, we propose the appointment of designated specific accessibility officers to not only oversee accessibility provisions, but to ensure service provision for the sector of persons with disabilities, which, by the way, doesn't only benefit the sector, it also benefits the elderly, it also benefits other vulnerable people in our community. So we want this law to be specific that there should be accessibility officers. And we shouldn't only see this in the cities, but also in the rural areas as well. Our other proposed amendment for the bill is to make ITPs and provincial frameworks to include standalone, detailed, and costed universal access implementation plans. And these need to be developed in consultation with organizations of persons with disabilities. It's very sad when we think we have a ramp, but as a person in a wheelchair, you cannot take on that ramp. You cannot get on that ramp because it's too steep. Clear indication that there were no persons with disabilities when there was the planning stage, there was the design stage, implementation stage, and therefore we end up with infrastructure that is not practical or functional. So consultation with persons with disabilities is actually prudent financially, because if we do it during these planning stages to implementation, it works out much cheaper, much more cost effective than doing it as an afterthought. So please consult us. Lastly, before I hand over to my colleague Lily, this is also an amendment that we have proposed to the Department of Small Business Development, that businesses that are providers of these services, we make a requirement of compliance in universal design and accessibility. It must be a compliance that is mandatory. Before a company goes and buys electric buses, they should also by law be mandated to also be universally accessible. And we will not only need the transport department to ensure this, we also need business to come on board. Housing, to make housing everything that is built our infrastructure, we also need the Department of Housing to come on board. But transport, we appeal to you, this is a good start. all service providers for transport, they ought to be mandated by law, punishable by law, failure to do so, that they ought to have universal design and accessible standards as part of the requirements for compliance for them to be able to trade. And this is not a pie in the sky requirement. A lot of developed countries are already doing it. We need to lead Africa into the new dawn. And part of that is also mandating binding regulations on universal designs on all vehicles that are for public transport. 100%, not some, all of them. We must have a funded phase retrofitting plan for existing fleet. And then we must make sure that the human element is sensitized, is conscientized. We must teach people how to deal with disability. Disability awareness is a human right. It's something that should be done. Let's appeal to our service providers to do the right thing. Not only physical disabilities, but non-apparent disabilities as well. With that, I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Lily. So I'm just going to stop sharing for a minute. Please bear with me. And I'm going to allow Lily to also, I need to unmute her so that she can continue with the presentation.
Thanks very much, Dr. Who's coming in now?
My colleague Lily is coming in.
Lily, come in.
I am trying to unmute Lily. If the other host can please assist me. It says ask to unmute, so kindly unmute her on your side as well.
Advocate, can you unmute her?
I think I'm unmuted now.
Awesome, Lily, you can go ahead. I'm going to start sharing again.
Okay. Thank you so much, Notigella, and good morning, members of Parliament, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present, to echo everything that Anthony and Notigella have just said. So I will be taking us through the next few slides, and I'll be continuing with the amendments that we propose. We also propose amendments relating to e-hailing services. These amendments would require e-hailing operators to include accessible vehicles in their fleets, as well as to provide in-app functionality to specify accessibility needs. Then we also propose amendments related to infrastructure standards. These amendments would legally bind all spheres of government to a single, high-quality national standard for accessible infrastructure, including tactile ground surface indicators, audible and visual signals, ramps, lifts, and obstacle-free sidewalks. Then we propose amendments related to funding. These include establishing a National Land Transport Accessibility Fund to subsidize the costs of accessible vehicles, retrofitting fleets, and recruiting infrastructure. They also include making national land transport grants conditional on progress against universal accessible implementation plans. We also propose amendments relating to monitoring and enforcement. These amendments would require the Minister to table annual reports in Parliament on the state of accessibility in the transport system. They would also introduce clear complaints and redress mechanism for users who experience discrimination or service failures, together with sanctions for non-compliance. So I will briefly discuss the purpose of the NLTA Accessibility Fund. It would essentially be threefold. First, procuring accessible vehicles by supporting the purchase of new public transport vehicles that need universal design and accessibility standards. Second, retrofitting existing fleets by financing the modification of current vehicle fleets to ensure accessibility with clear deadlines for implementation. And third, upgrading infrastructure by funding improvements to transport infrastructure to meet universal design standards, such as tactile ground surface indicators, as mentioned, auditory and visual signals, ramps, lifts, and obstacle-free sidewalks. So our call to action is to amend the National Land Transport Act to make accessibility requirements mandatory for all public transport planning authorities and service providers. This would establish enforceable national standards for accessible transport, including minimum service levels, funding mechanisms, and performance monitoring. It would also legally require consultation with organizations representing persons with disabilities in transport planning and service design, as mentioned by my colleague Notigella. Finally, we also call for oversight and accountability mechanisms from the Department of Transport and parliamentary committees. And we emphasize that access to transport must be recognized as a human right because it's foundational to equality, employment, and dignity for all South Africans. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I will now hand over to my colleague Anthony to wrap up.
Thanks, Lily, and Dr. Keller. So just our last slide, just in conclusion. the Western Cape Network on Disability, on behalf of our constituents, on behalf of people with disabilities, not only in the Western Cape, but around the country, we call on Parliament to urgently review and amend the NLTA. Really what we're saying is free our innocent, remove the shackles, make transport accessible so that people with disabilities can play a full role in our communities and contribute to society. As I mentioned at the start of the presentation, all three people who presented to you today are people with disabilities. I'm paralyzed from my shoulders down, but with transport, being able to be mobile, we are able to contribute to our country, which is what we want to do. So please remove the shackles that are placed on us by an inaccessible public transport system. And then our vision is we're asking you to ensure that every South African, regardless of disability, irrespective of their level of mobility, are able to access reliable and dignified public transport. And just to reiterate, not just in the metros, not just in large towns, but we need to accommodate people in our rural areas and right across the country, because the reality is that we can talk about including people with disabilities, we can talk about inclusion, we can talk about equitable life, health, whatever it may be, but this cannot happen without mobility. That's our presentation. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and we now invite questions and comments.
Thanks very much, my chief. Honorable Blosser.
No, thank you very much, Chair. Maybe let's also welcome the presentation from our colleagues from the Western Cape Network on Disability. Chair, they've highlighted and gave key aspects on the key issues that they need to address, and we welcome that. And maybe not to be repetitive, Chair, just maybe quickly on our side, since it was Honorable Noluchungu who brought the petition forward. So we just want to highlight, Chair, that actually it's a long-standing issue, Chair. So it's not something that is coming before Parliament for the first time. In fact, now we view it as an injustice, Chair, that continues to deny millions of our people their dignity. It denies them mobility, and ultimately it's exclusion, from participation in society. So, Chair, this petition for us, we are saying there should not just be a procedural matter at this point, but it must be a call for action. For far too long, people with disabilities, they have been treated merely as an afterthought, in our transport planning. So we always do policies and we acknowledge the need for accessible transport and inclusion in policy, but really in practice, they are abandoned. Whatever is there might be in policy is never there in practice. And as I previously said, it's a crisis that has been there for quite some time, raised by various stakeholders, but enforcement has not been there. And I think this time around, Chair, we really need to look at the shortcomings within the NLTA and act decisively to have those amendments. So for us, again, Chair, like I said, it's not just a transport issue, it's a constitutional issue, it's an economic issue. It also questions us as members of Parliament that do we really believe in equality, or it's just rhetoric for us? So we really need to look at it. And if you look at the petition, Chair, as I appeal also to other members, you will notice that it's very clear and practical. It does not, require miracles. It just calls for certain enforceable standards. It's calling for accountability, because most of these clauses that are within the NLTA seeks to, appear to someone to do them. And if they don't, there's no enforceable mechanism to mitigate against that. So, Chair, as in closing, I'm saying let's just work together and call on the executive and the department to act with agency on these issues and make sure that the amendments that are required are done, because our people can no longer wait. That was just my emphasis on the issues, Chair. Thank you very much.
Honorable Blosser, thanks very much. Let me really thank you and the colleagues from the Western Cape Disability Network, and thank you in your absence here, Honorable Noluchungu, and yourself, Honorable Blosser, and the entire family of your political party, the Economic Freedom Fighters, for even seeing it fit to raise this particular petition on behalf of the people. It's not just for the people of Western Cape, it's for all of us. It's for all of us, and then for the people of South Africa. And I think you have done a great work. I think we must really appreciate you, because the type of a society that we want to build, the South Africa that we want to build, is South Africa that, as President will always say, an inclusive society. And inclusive society is an inclusive society in the literal meaning of inclusive. We can't leave anyone behind. And if our transport and network system are not accommodative to the people living with disabilities, then it's a problem that we must really confront. And to the extent that yourself as Economic Freedom Fighters, together with them, you saw it befitting that we must table it here before us so that we can look into how best we can amend laws, is something that we must commend and appreciable. Being a responsible citizen and being a responsible, caring and loving South African means exactly that, to look beyond yourself and think of other people. So I'm going to allow members who want to comment or to ask a question, but we'll know that from there we move straight to the guidance, Alma, on what must happen in terms of the process from now. And then from there we'll close this particular matter, because we can't exhaust it today. We'll now have to go and follow certain processes for it to be actualized, but it will first have to depend on the views of honorable members who are here if they want to say something. Honorable members, you're welcome to give inputs.
So, Chair, thanks. Even when you don't recognize us, we'll recognize ourselves.
is giving you a problem. Yeah, I'm trying to get to see the hands. I've seen your hands, Honorable Ghana and Honorable Malmacha. In that order, Honorable Ghana, come in, then Honorable Malmacha.
Thanks. Let me thank Anthony, Lily, and NLTA for the presentation, and also for continuing on this path to ensure that our, especially public transport, is accessible to all, and it's inclusive. Like when we talk about an inclusive and equal South Africa, it must be equal access to public transport. So I think this is something that we do have to take, because unlike some of the other petitions that we say, the petition that we will deal with now as a report, so this one is asking for a change in legislation, which will then requires either ourselves to make a committee amendment or speak with the department to give us an update on this, so that they see whether there is they can bring an executive bill that we can look at, especially on the issues of accessibility and inclusion. I think that's what I want to. But I want to just thank the team for this presentation. It is something that we, even ourselves as Rise Mzansi, fully back. It is critical that we get these amendments, and also start also when we do have conversations, because certain things don't have to wait for amendments. Is to say what are the things that can be done now, and then we start getting those things. Because if we at all times wait for legislative when things can be done, whether with the bus operating networks, I mean, we're going to be looking at the bus rapid system. We're going to be interacting with the taxi industry. So we need to make moves that can be done now, and not just say we will wait for legislation. We should adopt the posture that says, if there are things that can be done now, let's get them done. And then if there are things that needs to wait for legislation, let's wait for that legislation. But let's not delay the full enjoyment of the rights as contained in the Constitution, because the legislation it's not explicit on this need. So let's work to ensure that the changes that can be done are done, Chair, and not only rest on this. So this, what I'm saying to the team, it's the posture that I would like to adopt. It's not one that waits for the amendment of the legislation, but to say what are the things that can be done now, and if there are things that can be done now, let's do them and not have to wait for the full legislative process. Thanks very much.
Good morning, everybody.
Come in, Honorable Malmacha. Thanks, Honorable Ghana. Thanks very much, Honorable Ghana.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, colleagues, presenters, petitioners, South Africa at large. This is one of a very progressive move that I think it just needs support across. Honorable Ghana, you little bit came to where I was to say the second batch of Golden Arrow buses. It will require us as a committee to check with the department how best can they ensure that that thing is adhered to. You will recall that these Golden Arrow buses are taking people as far as Langa, Kailicha, and the surroundings. And you have listened to the presentation and how they are left outside just to go and arrive in the city where they want to participate and enjoy life like any other person. So these other things, if we check in human settlement, nowadays all the houses that are built now, they are coming with the rent to allow that. Now the question, why it is not done throughout? So this is a calling to say the department and the portfolio committee, if it is happening there, why can't it happen? And we are saying here as the portfolio committee that we have no any reason why it must not happen. We are fully behind it because it's practical and workable, regardless of politics. It just needs to assist this sector, and the sector that is very proud of us because they are following the right channels. Therefore, we remain a bridge for them to achieve this, so that at the end of the day, we seem to be a caring nation, caring government. The only question that I want the presenter clarifying is when they were dealing with the issue of changing the name disability. If through you, Chair, they can narrate much on that, so we get. Other than that, Chair, I think I'm joining you with your remarks when you were really showing the importance of this and how we normally support. And other two colleagues, we're very, very simple, as we're supposed to, especially when we deal with the petitions which are given, is for us just to implement, get other sister departments that are involved and other legislative sectors to ensure that we finish this as early as possible. Because this one, we just need to open the door and check where's the key. If the key is lost, get the key open and this thing being implemented. But of course, they will understand that normally it takes long. But with us having this energy, I think it can work because indeed people want to enjoy visiting wherever they are. You know, it was very touching when one speaker, the presenter, was saying, after 32 years, I was doing this. The speaker has got the experience of not being disabled and now being disabled. So this is the voice of reason to say we can still enjoy this if this thing is permissible in this way. And it is forced nearly every service provider to understand that it's not only this type of people, there's also this type of people that must come in. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Honorable Malmaja. I didn't catch your last point. What did you say on the last point?
I think it was on the question of changing the name disability. It's what I just did clarity from there.
Oh. Colleagues, if you can come in.
I'm battling to raise my hand.
Oh, now that you are welcome, Honorable Kubeka, you can come in.
Okay, greetings, Chair, and greetings to the House. Greetings to our special guests today. Chair, we in the Portfolio Committee of Transport, I think it seems like we're unanimous in saying we need to support these issues that have been brought before us today. Chair, we support this, and if I'm to be correct, this is not the first time that issues like this have been brought to Parliament by not necessarily this entity, but by other entities that represent people who are disabled. Chair, we need to help where we can. We are in support of all of the amendments and all of the issues that they are raising. Can we assist where we can? Can we push as quickly as possible to help them where we can help them to get access to basically South Africa as a whole? Because with the buses that are coming, can we actually make an actual effort to try and get those buses to be fitted with the necessary equipment to enable people with disabilities to be able to hop in and out of those buses? Can we help them everywhere else, not necessarily on only the buses where we can? We are the Portfolio Committee of Transport, and we need to get this thing done. It is our responsibility. This is why we are here in Parliament as legislators, to help South Africans. Now, the disability agency or the disability community cannot be left behind. Let's just emphasize, Chair, on the implementation of the Act, and we must make sure that the department on our end enforces all of these recommendations. With that, Chair, I thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Kubeka. Can I allow respondents to clarify some two issues that have been asked, and then I'll give a way forward on what must happen?
Chair, we just have one more hand from Dr. Hansinger.
Oh, thanks very much. I don't see Hansi. I don't know what's happening to my gadget. Dr. Hansinger, please come in. Leadership.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and let me also thank the presenters, Anthony, Lily, and the rest of the team of the Western Cape Network on Disability. Just also to add that it was a very well prepared and a very professional submission. So thank you for that. Yes, thank you for highlighting all the important aspects, which is important, and also thank you for making a study of a particular piece of legislation, the National Land Transport Act. You certainly highlighted important elements in specialized transport, also the issues and challenges around the services, and also highlighted particular barriers. And I just made a summary of those three basic elements that most certainly apply to the NLTA. It is, however, a bit more complex because we also sit with issues around addressing particular pieces of legislation around the different spheres of government who each have their own set of legislations and acts. And I'm just mentioning one, for instance, if we think about the particular challenges and barriers and service challenges and need for specialized transport around scholars, which is a separate piece of legislation. So you have certainly triggered the thinking around the whole scope and spectrum of legislation that need to be addressed, not just the NLTA, but most certainly in making NLTA the example, which is the most important and probably the overarching piece of legislation. So you've definitely highlighted that and placed emphasis on the right place. Chairperson, from my side, definitely thank you for the submission, thank you for the presentation, also for taking it up in the agenda. It is absolutely important and definitely something that we need to process in a very prioritized manner. So from my side, I can assure commitment for involvement and keen interest in processing following this petition that was tabled, and that we would deal with a full spectrum of content, not just what was highlighted here, but that we would need to open up the full scope of transport needs over the whole spectrum, and not just what was highlighted here. Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you to the presenters.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hansinger. Let me see if there's another hand I've not seen. Yeah, I'm going to allow you, Noktula and Anthony, and the whole team to respond if there's a point that you want to respond on briefly without going into detail, because we have now formally received your petition, and I'll then guide on what is going to happen from here. Notukela.
Thank you, Chairperson. It is not Tugela like the Tugela River. Thank you so much, Dr. Hansinger. We are not legislators, but we felt it necessary to go through this route so that accessible design, universal design and accessible transport can be realized within our lifetime. So thank you for appreciating our presentation. Also, I just need to extend a word of thanks to all the members who have voiced their support for the proposed amendments. It's good to know that we are on the right track and that the people who are in Parliament, who are meant to serve us, are also in support, in full support of our human rights, because disability rights are human rights. There was a question regarding the area that I had covered, which was the language around disability. And we proposed that the definition of disability must be expanded, not changed, Honorable Member, but it needs to be inclusive of both physical and non-physical, apparent and non-apparent disabilities. And if we can change the definition, and then we will also start to see the reasonable accommodation be expanded. For instance, people with psychosocial disabilities have different requirements than persons who have physical disabilities. I think for the longest time, maybe even because we represent disability in every sign, persons with disabilities on a wheelchair understood to be the to define disability, but there are people who have non-apparent disabilities. We will never know that they have a disability. However, the law must still expand the definition to also accommodate them, because they also have different requirements for reasonable accommodation to be able to live a life of dignity and to be able to access mobility through public transport. I hope that answers your question, Honorable Member. Thank you.
Not together.
Yebo.
As in the river, not together.
Yebo.
She from Tugela River.
Yeah. I'm going, Honorable Member.
No, much appreciated. Ngisho ukuthi Nokutugela means she of the Tugela River.
Yes.
Okay. No, thanks very much, colleagues. I think what is going to happen now, what will happen is that we have now noted formally the petition. We are going to have to meet with the executive to formally put it to them that there is this issue. We recommend that there must be intervention. We'll have a discussion with them on how best we can deal with the matter. And in a short space of time, we'll debrief you. And then later on, we'll invite you in our discussion with the department so that we formally tell you what is going to happen with your petition. But once again, I must express my sincere appreciation for the work that you have done in raising this particular matter and tabling it before us. Much appreciated. Alma, we must thank them once again, and we can then release them and remain dealing with other aspects. But be assured them that in a short space of time, probably tomorrow, no, now that we're going on recess, as soon as we come back, you'll liaise with them and explain to them as to when we're going to be meeting with them again. This is the matter that we assist with. Honorable members have spoken mouthful. You are right, Honorable Kubeka. We are not seeming to be agreeing. We are overwhelmingly agreeing, all of us, that this is a very serious, it's a very serious omission that we must be the first to rectify. We can't continue to take a podium in Parliament and speak about inclusive and equal society, as Honorable Ghana, you are saying, without take into cognizance this particular aspect, because then we'll be hypocrites. So we must take a charge, we must take a lead, and we must do it in that particular way. Honorable Malamacha, as Honorable Onsinga have said. Thanks very much. Colleagues, compatriots, have a great day. You can release them, and then we take another program. Consideration of the adoption of the Amadiwa community. The petition, I think here we just have to adopt the report. We can release them, and then we table it. Thanks very much, colleagues. Any parting shot from any of you? Okay.
Thanks, Jay. Just parting shot.
Yes, Anton.
So thank you very much. Just to say that we have disabilities. So some of us cannot hear. We need you to be our ears. Some of us can't see, but it doesn't mean we don't have vision. And then some of us can't walk. So we need you, our leaders, to walk the walk for us and to make sure that transport moving forward is accessible to everyone. And we thank you for the opportunity, and we look forward to walking the walk and getting on public transport with you and all our fellow South Africans. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Anton. Look, the fact of the matter is that you are because we are because you are. We are one, and the South Africa that we all have to build is South Africa that recognizes all of us. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Jay.